Hello, my content explorer. Are you watching from a seaside cottage or from a city where skyscrapers touch the clouds? Share your location in the comments. I'm curious. And of course, send this video to your friends and family. Let's start. The instant Darla brought her into my office, I felt it. She had the kind of presence that carried complications with her. Not the kind who stirs up trouble directly, but the kind that invites it in without even realizing. That's the gut reaction I had when I looked up and saw her standing there, clearly uncertain and uneasy. Mr. Corbin? She asked quietly, voice tinged with apprehension. Didn't take long to recognize the signs. Wedding ring, hesitant body language. Happens a lot in my line of work. Nate Corbin, I replied, giving her a nod. And no, not that Nate Corbin. Happens more than you'd think. I've had fan mail show up at my office more than once. Comes with the territory when you're a private investigator in Los Angeles with a name borrowed from a pop star. Truth is, my father named me after a fictional spy from some dusty Jove publishing series he loved. Corbin was already on the birth certificate. He just slapped Nate on top of it. Not Nicholas, just Nate. And that's the story. I stood and extended my hand. What brings you here, ma'am? My friend said you might be able to help, she said with a forced smile, nerves still showing. She used you before, said you were discreet. I see, I said. And you are? Jessa Langston, she replied. My husband's Dorian Langston. He's a therapist. I think he's cheating on me. I need evidence before I move ahead with a divorce. She reached into her bag and handed over a photograph. I examined the image. Early to mid-40s, strong jaw, dark hair touched with gray at the temples, striking green eyes, the kind that could easily pull someone into a mess. All right, Mrs. Langston, do you know how I usually work? I asked. She nodded. Good. Typically 2 weeks is enough to confirm or rule out what you suspect. That'll run you $5,000. Fair? That's fine, she said quickly. You usually take half up front, right? Do you have access to funds he can't monitor? A private account or anything off his radar? I do, she said. Opened it a while ago, just in case. The person who referred me said you were thorough and discreet. She passed me a cashier's check, $2,500, just like clockwork. Thanks, I said, slipping the check into my desk. Now tell me everything. The more I know, the better I can do my job. She hesitated, then started. Honestly, it doesn't even make sense. He's always home, nights, weekends. But whenever I try calling his office around lunchtime, the phone's off. He might be with a patient, I suggested casually. That's what I figured at first. But at home, he's been distant, cold. We used to be affectionate, but now, nothing. And there's this smell. A perfume, not mine. I thought I imagined it, but it keeps showing up on his shirts. Maybe a patient hugged him, I said. How old is he? 44. I nodded. Some men around that age go through a period where they lose interest, physically. Think that might explain his behavior? Her eyes narrowed. Are you implying I'm just making this up, overreacting? Not at all, I said. I just want to be sure we're not chasing ghosts. Perfume is something, not proof, but it's a clue. Don't worry, I'm taking the case. I just need everything you've noticed. Any routines, changes, anything that stood out. She took a breath, then added, He always used to call me before lunch on Mondays and Wednesdays. Lately, those calls have stopped. Either I get voicemail right away or no call at all. Noted, I said. Tomorrow's Wednesday. I'll begin then. I'll contact you once I've got something substantial. I rose as she did and we shook hands again. Thank you, Mr. Corbin. I really hope I'm wrong, but I have to know. I need clarity. She gave me a small, sincere smile. She was stunning, no question. If I hadn't been wearing a wedding ring of my own, maybe I would have been tempted to offer more than just a professional service. Of course, Mrs. Langston. And just so you know, if I don't find anything by the end of 2 weeks, you keep the rest of the fee. That's my policy. Thank you again, Mr. Corbin. Please, I said with a smile. Call me Nate. Mr. Corbin was my father. Her smile warmed. All right then, Nate. My name's Jessa. Just Jessa, please. Ma'am feels too formal. Got it, Jessa, I said with a nod. I'll be in touch once there's something solid. Darla, my assistant, had already taken down her information, so I knew how to reach her. I walked Jessa to the front door, assured her I'd follow up, and watched her leave. Seconds later, Darla Varela breezed into the office and dropped into the leather chair across from mine like she owned it. Darla had been by my side for 6 years now, and I honestly couldn't imagine running this place without her. She was fully aware of her value, too. She wasn't married, occasionally dated, but never seemed too invested. Darla was breathtaking. Long, silky black hair, dark eyes full of mischief, and the kind of golden-brown skin that glowed thanks to her Mexican roots. Think Jennifer Lopez, but somehow more mesmerizing. Her figure turned heads without even trying. If I weren't happily married, Darla would be dangerous. I may be committed, but I'm not blind. Still, there are lines I've never crossed, and never will. "All right, Jefe," she said with a knowing grin. "Here's what I've gathered so far." She handed over a folder packed with preliminary findings on our latest case. Darla had grown into a sharp investigator, quick on the uptake, solid instincts, all of which I'd helped nurture. I flipped through the pages. Dorian Langston, a psychologist with credentials that looked great on paper. But about halfway through, my gut started to tighten. A malpractice suit from a couple of years back had been quietly dropped, explained away in vague terms. That wasn't just a curiosity, it was a warning sign. The complainant? A woman whose husband filed for divorce not long after the case was closed. My instincts weren't just whispering, they were screaming. "Darla," I said, eyes still on the document, "dig into the husband. I've got a bad vibe about him." She chuckled. "You sounded like a character in a thriller." "I set it up," I said, smirking. "Thanks for not finishing the cliché." "Any time, boss." She winked and turned back to her computer, probably opening up Bing to track down every dirty detail on Dr. Langston. Darla's worth every cent I pay her, and then some. Even though she makes more than most people in our line of work, it's still not what she deserves. We split the profits, 60-40 my favor. Between all our clients and contracts, we pull in over $200,000 a year. After taxes and costs, I pocket about $150,000. Darla clears around $110,000. We share a lawyer too, Wesley Quentin. We send him clients. He keeps our legal tracks covered. His expertise? Divorce and domestic chaos. Our cases often leave that kind of mess behind, and Wes is damn good at cleaning up. Then there's my wife, Sierra Corbin, though she prefers just Sierra. And no, she's not related to the Stargate character, if that's what you're thinking. I met her 7 years ago, right after I quit my post at Langley and came back to Los Angeles. At the time, I was working insurance investigations, steady gig, decent money. But after one case in Paris turned into a logistical nightmare, thanks to a client who thought he was above the law, I figured I'd had enough. I'd socked away enough cash to start fresh, so I opened my own PI firm. Meeting Sierra changed everything. She's gorgeous, about 5 feet 8 inches, and when she wears her favorite heels, we're the same height. I met her at a party hosted by my first official client, celebrating the recovery of some stolen property I had tracked down. I was the guest of honor. Sierra was there as the daughter of one of the guy's close friends. From the first glance, there was this pull, like gravity decided we belonged in the same orbit. We talked, danced, talked more. I met her dad, who was easygoing and didn't question the whole former insurance guy turned private eye story. That night I walked away with a couple more clients. But the real win? Sierra. We dated for 6 months, lived together for another 6, and then got married in a small ceremony, just her family and a handful of close friends. My parents had passed away years earlier in a car crash abroad. They left me their house, though, mortgage-free. As for me, I'd served 3 years in the Army, working as an interrogator. From there, I moved into investigating insurance fraud. I had a knack for it, and private sector gigs paid a hell of a lot more. So I quit the corporate world and went solo. Getting a concealed carry permit in LA wasn't easy. Felt like pulling teeth without anesthesia, but I got it. I now carry my father's Colt M 1911A1. Fires a 45 ACP. If you aim right, 1 round's all you need. Good thing I'm a damn fine shot. I made my way over to Darla's workstation. She was still digging into Dr. Langston's background, printing out every scrap she could uncover. Darla, I said, wrap it up once you're done. Call it a day. I was on my way back home. I shot her a grin. All good, Chief. She smiled back, and it wasn't just a professional courtesy. It felt warmer than that. You know, she said, I really hope Sierra realizes what she has waiting for her at home. She knows, hun, I replied. One day some guy's going to be damn lucky, if you ever decide to settle down. I gave her a teasing smirk. Bit late for that, sweetheart. I missed that train by a couple of months, she said with a shrug that tried to look indifferent. I was just about to ask what she meant, but she was already focused on her screen again. All right, sugar, just get everything organized and filed. I'll pick it up first thing tomorrow. Night, I said, heading for the door. Later, boss, she called out cheerfully as I stepped out. I slid into the driver's seat and fired up the engine. As I pulled away, my thoughts turned to Sierra. Lately, she hadn't exactly been distant, but something was definitely off, like she had something on her mind but couldn't bring herself to say it. There was something she wasn't telling me, hadn't for a while. And right then I decided, tonight I'd push her to talk. No more skirting around. I knew the signs too well, seen them plenty of times. It always played out the same. The partner becomes emotionally detached, right before or just after an affair. Every time I asked her if she was okay or if she needed to talk, she gave the same tired response. Nothing. Why, that's the universal answer I'll never get. Sure, some women are open. But most act like we're supposed to read their minds. Spoiler, we're not psychic. If you've got something to say, just say it. I was still thinking about all this when I turned onto our street and spotted a Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo parked at the curb. The second I pulled into the driveway, my phone lit up. Sierra's name flashed on the screen. Hey, love, I answered. Hi, Nate, she said, her voice slightly tense. When are you getting here? There's something we need to discuss. Something about her phrasing felt off. We? I repeated, my eyes narrowing at the strange SUV. Just come home quickly, all right? Sure, babe, love you. Okay, bye. That uneasy feeling that had been building in my chest suddenly erupted into full-scale panic. I reached into my coat to check if my voice recorder was there. Yep, right pocket. Phone camera? Still good. Without thinking, I aimed it at the Jeep and took a quick shot of the license plate. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Sierra hadn't shown me real affection in ages, so why now? I closed my eyes and took a few deep breaths, running through a calming technique I'd relied on for years. Once I'd steadied myself, I stepped out of the car, tension crackling through every step. I'd always trusted my instincts. They'd never failed me. And sure enough, the second I stepped inside, I saw them. Wrapped up in each other's arms, kissing like they hadn't a care in the world. So into each other, they didn't even notice me standing there. I lifted my phone and captured it all before they turned around. Still calm, I walked in like nothing was wrong, snapping a few more photos as they froze mid-embrace. With my hand in my pocket, I quietly pressed the record button. Sierra jumped as her eyes met mine. Nate, Jesus, you startled me. She tried again. Nate. So, I interrupted, raising a brow. Mind telling me why you're playing tonsil hockey with this clown in my house, future ex-wife? That's part of the reason I asked you to come home, she mumbled. I finally turned to the man beside her, and every part of me screamed for a weapon. Because I knew that face. Dorian Langston. The guy I was currently investigating. And here he was, in my living room, with my wife. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't felt like a knife to the gut. I was literally being paid to dig up dirt on this bastard, and turns out the dirt was sleeping in my bed. All I wanted was to destroy them both, but the anger burned hotter than the heartbreak, holding the pieces of me together. I had a job to finish. The paycheck demanded I keep my cool. Revenge could wait, but it was coming, and it would be brutal. So, I said, steadying my voice, What exactly did you need to talk about? Mr. Corbin, can I call you Nate? The bastard asked. No, you can't. Only friends call me that. You? You're the guy screwing my wife. So no, we'll never be friends. Got it? He nodded, unfazed. Understood. I'm Dr. Dorian Langston. I've been seeing your wife in therapy. Of course he had. Is this so-called therapy of yours supposed to involve kissing my wife under my roof? I tilted my head slightly, sarcasm dripping from the gesture. Actually, yes, he said with absolute seriousness. I realize how bizarre that may seem, possibly even unacceptable. But it's a critical part of the treatment, and your presence is required during the session. Was this guy for real? I've met smarter vending machines. He was practically gift-wrapping every legal win I needed, handing me leverage for the custody battle, fueling my alienation of affection claim, and walking straight into the malpractice lawsuit already forming in my mind. I held his gaze for a beat longer than necessary. So, Dr. Dorian Langston, correct? I made sure my voice sounded respectful, even a bit impressed. I've heard you're top tier in your field, clinical psychology, isn't it? He gave a proud nod. That's right. Psychology. My methods can be unconventional, sure, but they're consistently effective. And how long has my wife been under your care? I kept my tone even, but fury simmered just beneath it. Roughly 8 weeks, he answered with ease. 2 months. She hadn't breathed a word. I turned toward Sierra, the disbelief sinking in like concrete. Sierra, if things were really falling apart, why didn't you just say something? I told you back when we first started dating. If anything ever felt wrong, all you had to do was come to me. Don't you remember? I think I do, she murmured, voice small and unsure. For just a moment, her expression cracked, uncertainty flashing across her face. Then the clown decided to interject. Sierra, recall what we discussed. Control. You need to reclaim it. You detest feeling helpless, so don't. Take initiative. Show him you mean it. His voice had a strange cadence, almost hypnotic. And just like that, her face lost its softness. Her features hardened, rigid, and mechanical. You're right, Dorian. I have to prove I'm not just some fragile woman who gets bossed around. Her eyes locked with mine, unrecognizable and cold. Sierra, what the hell are you saying? I blurted out. When have I ever made you feel powerless? In bed, she snapped. It's always about your preferences, never mine. She was yelling now. Sierra, don't you remember the vow we made after the wedding? That if either of us wanted to try something new, we'd talk about it first, figure it out together? That's all it would have taken. A conversation. A flicker of confusion passed across her face. I saw it, but it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by something hard and final. Nate, I'm doing this. You can stay or leave, but it's happening, she said with a chilling sense of resolve. Don't, Sierra. What I really meant was, keep going. I'm documenting every second of this disaster. But I held back. I already had plenty. More was inevitable. I need this, Nate. It won't change how I feel about you. I still love you, she said, forcing a smile that felt like a mask. I saw the lie instantly. I need to try something different, just this once. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman I knew with the stranger standing in front of me. Let it be clear, I don't want this. And if you go through with it, there will be fallout, I said, deliberately slumping into what looked like defeat. It was the image I wanted to project, to both of them. Mr. Corbin, the good doctor chimed in with casual confidence. May I ask, do you happen to have a chair in your bedroom? So he fully intended to desecrate our marriage in the very place we built it. Mental note. Burn the mattress, replace everything. Yeah, there's a chair, I muttered. Wait, are you seriously telling me I have to be in the room while this happens? I threw on my best impression of horrified disbelief. It's essential to the treatment, said Dr. Delusional, calm as ever. If that's what it takes, I growled under my breath. But is there really no other way to get my wife back to her old self? I'm afraid not, he answered with all the sincerity of a soap opera actor. Well, just so we're clear, don't expect me to get involved in this twisted mess, I muttered. Mr. Corbin, he said with the smirk of a man who thought he had it all figured out, what your wife and I are doing doesn't fall under adultery. I'm merely guiding her through a psychological breakthrough, meant to deepen her emotional connection with you. You'll both be stronger after this, he said with a smirk so smug it made my trigger finger twitch. It took every shred of control I had not to shove my gun in his mouth and empty the clip. Let me be crystal clear, I snapped, each syllable sharp. I don't approve of this. I never will. What you're doing with my wife, call it whatever you want, it's still cheating. That's what adultery is, no matter how pretty you dress it up. I noticed he wasn't wearing a ring. No pale band, no impression. Nothing. As I said before, Mr. Corbin, he replied, voice smooth as glass, this is a therapeutic process. Unconventional maybe, but not unfaithful. His smile widened, now condescending, as if he thought I was too naive to understand his twisted logic. Give it time, he said. There's some discomfort in the beginning, but after that, nothing but pleasure. I didn't feel pain, just a cold, dead numbness. Whatever love I'd had for Sierra had been buried long ago. All that remained now was a clean, burning fury, directed squarely at the smug bastard who thought screwing my soon-to-be ex-wife somehow counted as healing. I'm still not on board with this, I muttered, shaking my head as I followed them into the bedroom. With practiced ease, I slid my phone from my jacket, tilting it just enough to catch everything on camera as he began undressing her. He laid her on the bed with a softness that made my skin crawl. Sierra spread her legs without hesitation, obedient, her eyes never once flicking to me as I sat in the corner and recorded everything in grim silence. This is your last warning, I said, my voice flat as stone. You don't have my consent. He noticed the phone peeking from my jacket pocket. Maybe he figured I was too young or too dumb to be gathering evidence. He let out a low chuckle, as if that changes anything. And he carried on. That was it. That was all I needed. That moment sealed everything. I stood, crossed the room, grabbed a handful of his hair, and delivered a single strike to the nerve cluster at the base of his neck. He crumpled instantly. Tell me, doctor, I said, towering over his stunned form. Did my wife ever mention what I do for a living? His eyes fluttered, confused. Sierra looked at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. I'm a private investigator. Her mouth fell open. And I've got enough to prove this entire circus was a setup, an attempt to lure me into some deranged arrangement. I also have more than enough to file for divorce based on clear infidelity. I tapped the phone in my pocket. I've got recordings, I've got footage, I've got logs showing manipulation and misconduct. I smiled wide and reached behind my waist, pulling out my handgun. You know, Doc, you've got size on your side. You might have had a shot in a fair fight. I motioned toward him with the gun. But this little friend, he makes us equals. The man groaned, twitching on the floor. You'll be able to move soon, I said quietly. When you do, put your clothes on, collect your whore, and leave. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. My calm scared them more than rage ever could. Sierra let out a shaky breath, almost like she was relieved. I turned to her, the woman who had shattered everything we'd built. Sierra, I said, my tone like ice. Get dressed, pack up, and get out. What? She blinked, stunned. You heard me, I said. I warned you. I told you this would come at a cost. That time has arrived. I didn't feel like myself anymore. It was like I was watching someone else, detached, hollow. You're leaving today. Take your suitcase. I don't care if you put it in your car or his. Just go. I took out my phone again. I'm calling my attorney. We're drafting the divorce papers immediately, and I'll be filing restraining orders for both of you. I met her gaze without flinching. Thank God we never had children, and thank God I won't be fathering yours. I shook my head slowly, the ache in my chest bottomless. You destroyed me, Sierra. I hope it was worth it. My voice cracked at the end, despite everything. And if he tosses you aside after this? Run crying back to your parents. I watched her face twist through a storm of emotions, shock, denial, guilt. But above all else, confusion. But Nate, she whispered, her eyes wide, you still love me, don't you? Not after this, I said, louder now. Not after you let another man touch you in our bed while I said no over and over. That last word erupted like a shout. You shattered every vow we ever made. You spat on everything we promised. I made sure she saw it, felt it. Just a taste of the agony I'd been drowning in. She deserved that much. I don't even recognize you, I spat. Then I said her full name, Sierra, knowing she hated it. I only ever used it when I was truly furious. Sierra, remember what we said before the wedding? About loyalty? About being faithful? Her expression was blank. You told me you had no forgiveness for cheaters, none. That betrayal was unforgivable. I let that hang in the air. Well, I said slowly, now you get to live by your own damn rules. I stared straight through her. And so do I. The bastard hissed sharply before I could speak, his eyes narrowing like he might actually leap at me. I stepped back slowly, keeping the Colt steady in my grasp, pointed, not fired. I made sure Sierra stayed in my peripheral. You're making a grave mistake, Corbin. I'll be pressing charges, he said, wearing a smug little smirk. Not a chance, I answered, voice cold. I came home and found you in bed with my wife. What was I supposed to think? Looked like assault to me. Now tell me, who's going to sound more believable to the police? The PI who stepped in to stop a rape, or the therapist swearing it was all mutual? I nodded toward Sierra. Take a good look at her, Doc, really see her. That pain in her face, that shame. His eyes followed mine and his confidence slipped. Good timing on my part, huh? A few minutes later and you'd be gone. Maybe I should go ahead and make that call. He paled, mind working overtime, clearly rethinking his options. All right, no harm done. Let's not make a scene. He forced a smile, but it fell apart as soon as it formed, like soggy drywall on a ceiling. No charges, no headlines, nothing. Oddly enough, he hadn't mentioned Sierra once. That didn't go unnoticed. Maybe he thought he was playing it close to the vest. I let him keep that fantasy, for the time being. But I was ready to twist the knife. Can't wait to see how this plays on the 6 o'clock news, I said, tone dry. Private investigator's wife found naked with her shrink. Stay tuned. I gave him a look that said everything I thought of him, and that was enough. His face flared red. Number, you can't let this go public, he shouted, the panic cracking through his voice. He scrambled to get dressed, checking that he hadn't left anything behind. Please, don't bring the media into this, he pleaded. I wasn't done. If you give back every dime my soon-to-be ex handed over to you, I said, voice like cut glass, then maybe I keep this between us. But I'm still suing you for malpractice and alienation of affection. His eyes flicked everywhere looking for a way out. His mask slipped entirely. All right, you win. Whatever you want, he stammered, utterly defeated. Whatever I want. Those words opened doors. But I wasn't in it for revenge, sex, or cheap thrills. I wanted him living in dread, shadowed by the fear of everything falling apart. I wanted him to experience the slow suffocation he'd tried to force on me. He probably thought it was all a game, seducing my wife. Now he'd find out what it was like to be the one played. I doubted he'd enjoy it half as much. Once he was dressed, he bolted from the bedroom like it was on fire. The door slammed behind him, swallowed by the dark. I turned to Sierra. Her eyes found mine, and what she saw there made her flinch. We can fix this, Nate, she whimpered, crocodile tears already falling. Please, baby. I let out a laugh, hard, hollow, and cold. Where was baby when I found you two? Where was any of that love then? The silence afterward sat heavy between us. Get dressed, pack up. You've got 1 hour to get out. I paused before finishing. Since the good doctor's obviously not interested anymore, maybe try calling your parents. She looked stunned. But the truth hit her soon enough. She didn't argue, just got dressed and started gathering her things. I watched her fill 4 suitcases, the generous limit I'd set, knowing full well I'd replace every item. While she scrambled to clean up the wreckage of her choices, I walked into my office. First, I called the locksmith. He was closing up for the night, but I promised extra cash if he came right away. Next, I phoned the furniture store and ordered a new queen-sized bed, mattress, sheets, pillows, comforter, the works. When the guy on the phone asked why the old one was to be dumped in the backyard, I cut him off. You're not being paid to ask questions. He understood. Sierra finished in under an hour. I even gave her a hand, hauled her bags out, and dropped them beside her car trunk without a word. Then I turned around, went back inside, and slammed the door shut behind me. I picked up the phone and called Wes, my lawyer. I told him to file for restraining orders against both Sierra and Dr. Dorian Langston. Divorce proceedings were next, along with the malpractice claim and alienation of affection suit. An hour later, the locks were changed and the new bed was in place. I paid both crews on the spot, credit card, of course. Then I called the credit card company and shut down every card Sierra had under my name. Finally, I got in touch with my bank manager and had him freeze her debit card. No explanation necessary. I was the primary account holder. My word was enough. Trust was dead, and now, so was whatever future she thought we still had. To anyone who thinks I stepped over some line, do me a favor and get lost. I poured a couple fingers of Chivas into a lowball glass. Normally, I stick to beer. It's always been my go-to, but tonight called for something stronger. I took a measured sip and stared into the amber liquid, wondering how things had unraveled so fast between me and my wife. By 7 o'clock, I could feel everything slipping away, so I called Darla. "Hola, jefe," she chirped, upbeat as always. "Hey, Darla," I said. "Sorry for the late call, but I really need you tonight." Even after 2 stiff drinks, I was weirdly proud of how clear I still sounded. "What's wrong, boss?" she asked, instantly serious. She picked up on the edge in my voice, tight, frayed, barely holding. "It's complicated," I admitted. "Too much to get into over the phone. Can you come by?" I felt myself unraveling, my control peeling away like old paint. "Of course, jefe, I'm heading over now." She ended the call before I could thank her. God bless that woman. 10 minutes later, she was at my door. I dragged myself off the couch, eyes still fixed on the silent TV, and let her in. She stepped inside fast, threw her arms around me like I was drowning, and she was the rope. She slammed the door behind her, twisted the lock, and took my hand without asking a single question. She led me back to the couch, sat me down, and dropped beside me. "Where's Sierra?" she asked, already putting it together. There was no car in the driveway, and I didn't have the hollow look that comes with losing someone to death. I met her eyes, deep, steady, grounded. "She left. Probably went back to her parents. She slept with someone else, Darla." That was it. I couldn't keep it inside anymore. The tears came fast, soaking into her shoulder as she held me like I was something worth holding on to. I clutched her like letting go would mean breaking apart. Once I stopped shaking, she eased back and looked at me. "Nate, are you sure? I mean, really sure she cheated?" I didn't trust myself to answer, so I reached into my pocket, pulled out my recorder, and set it on the coffee table. Then I pulled up a video on my phone, hit play, and handed it to her. As she listened and watched, her face darkened, fury, disgust, and something lethal flashing in her eyes. I got up, went to the kitchen, grabbed 2 beers, and came back. By the time I returned, she'd already paused both the audio and the footage. Her eyes were smoldering. I opened both bottles of arrogant bastard ale and passed her one. "Esa maldita perra pollas," she spat after taking a deep pull. That damn bitch. Darla never sugar-coated anything. I gave a crooked smile. If there was one thing about her, it was that she was loyal as hell. She took another swig, shut her eyes, and breathed through her nose. "So what's next, Nate?" she asked, placing her hand over mine. "Whatever you're planning, I'm in." "I want to bring the whole damn thing into the light," I said, voice raw. "I think Sierra might have been influenced, coerced even. If there was even a small chance she wasn't fully acting on her own, I had to find out. But if Dr. Cranberry, if that bastard is behind this, I want him burned to the ground. Him and his entire setup. Everyone but his wife. You met her. She was telling the truth. He's been stepping out. And not just with anyone. With my wife." "Christ, Nate, that's heavy," Darla murmured, shaking her head slowly. "All right, where do we begin?" "First move is recon," I said, slipping back into the mask I wore at work. I could pretend. I'd done it before. "I'm going to his office in a couple hours. You don't have to come. It could go sideways." "Don't insult me, jefe. You know I'm in. No hesitation." She gave me another firm hug, strong, steady, like a tether to something real. I know Sierra, Nate. I've known her almost as long as I've known you. And honestly, I think she was forced into that car. I think so too, I whispered. But even if that's true, I don't know if I can forgive her. She threw everything away. 2 months with that scumbag, and suddenly your whole marriage doesn't matter? I held Darla tighter. Right then, she felt like the only thing holding me together. I almost leaned in and kissed her, but I stopped myself, and for two very deliberate reasons. First, I still clung to the possibility that Sierra hadn't made her decisions entirely on her own. Maybe someone had pushed her, steered her. Maybe it wasn't too late to pull her back. Second, even if her choices were hers alone, I wasn't going to stoop to retaliation. I refused to betray her just because she'd crossed that line. Not even with Darla. And Darla, if you're in my head right now, and I know you are, you don't realize how close I came. But we had work to do. Saying that aloud cost me more self-control than I care to admit. I forced my focus to reset. We'll swing by the office, grab the van, I told her. Smart call, Chief, she said, her voice calm but her eyes giving her away. You'd have to be blind not to see she'd always carried a quiet flame for me. We'd traded light flirtation in the past, sure, harmless teasing, playful jabs. I never took it seriously. But now, with Sierra temporarily out of the picture, Darla wasn't exactly hiding her feelings. And part of me, if I'm being honest, a big part, was tempted to lean into it, to accept what she was offering so clearly. But I wasn't going to become the kind of person my wife had turned into. If there was going to be retribution, it wouldn't be impulsive or emotional. It would be cold, precise. Besides, I wasn't going to drag Darla into something that might end in more hurt. If it turned out Sierra had been coerced, if Dr. Langston had manipulated her somehow, then Darla, who genuinely cared, would be wrecked by what came next. So we took her car and headed to the office to pick up the van. From the trunk, I pulled out a pair of fake Comcast magnets and slapped them on the doors. Just enough of a disguise to pass unnoticed. She gave a nod of approval. Nice detail. We pulled up outside Dr. Dorian Langston's office just before midnight. Getting in wasn't difficult. I picked the lock quickly. Having the right tools and gloves makes all the difference. I was wearing thin calfskin gloves, supple enough for precision, thick enough to avoid leaving prints. The lock gave way with almost no resistance. Inside, I adjusted my earpiece and confirmed the line. Loud and clear, Jefe. Darla's voice came through sharp and steady. Tucked in my coat was a 50-gig flash drive. The mission was simple. Search his computer, then rifle through the physical files. I needed answers. If this guy had played Sierra, how many others had fallen for his tricks? I dialed his security service, posing as Langston, claimed I'd lost my password. It's amazing how far the right tone and a bit of confidence will get you. I used just enough arrogance, busy, annoyed, distracted, and they gave up the goods without asking a single question. No verification, no pushback. Amateurs, Darla chuckled in my ear. No kidding, I murmured back, working the lock on his private office door. Inside, I booted up the computer. No family photos, no personal touches, just sterile professional coldness. Funny, considering he had a gorgeous wife at home, and yet here he was, tangled up with his clients. I sat down at the keyboard. Password required, of course. I paused, thought it through. Langston wasn't dumb, but he wasn't subtle either. He was a man who thrived on charm, not caution. Darla had mentioned his history, whispers of lawsuits, allegations that vanished, complaints that never saw daylight. A familiar pattern of sleaze. I figured his password would match his inflated ego. Tried Romeo. Nope. Casanova. Still locked. Then I typed Lothario. Access granted. Typical. His file system was a mess, but navigating it was easy. He hadn't even tried to cover his tracks. One folder stood out, Special Patients. I copied the entire thing onto the drive. It was huge, nearly maxed out the 50 gigs. As I scanned the file names, one jumped out. Sierra Corbin. The bastard had saved videos. My stomach twisted, but I kept it buried. I ejected the drive, powered the system down, and turned to the file cabinet. I found Sierra's file quickly, but it was scrubbed clean. Standard clinical notes, sanitized. No smoking gun on paper. He was smart enough not to leave that kind of evidence lying around in hard copy. Darla's voice came through the earpiece. Find anything? Oh yeah, I whispered. Nothing on paper, but I've got 45 gigs of video. Him and several women. She exhaled hard. Jesus. We'll go through it all when we get home, she said. And the way she said we, the way she said home, it felt like more than just logistics. It felt like the next chapter had already begun. As I stepped out of the office, I made sure to lock up behind me, securing every entry point with care. Nothing left behind could tie me to the place. There were no surveillance cameras to worry about. The only trace of my presence had been a single call from a landline, one routed through layers of anonymity, impossible to trace. Voice ID might become an issue later if someone went digging, but that wasn't something I was about to lose sleep over. It was well after 1 in the morning when we finally pulled into my driveway. Once inside, I hit the garage button to seal the door, and before I could even open my mouth, Darla was already giving me a look like I'd lost my mind. I'm not leaving tonight, Nate, she said, her tone final, her stare unwavering. I didn't argue. Guest room's all yours, I said with a shrug. She shook her head. No, Nate. I'm staying with you. In your bed. Don't even try to stop me. You shouldn't be alone right now. That unspoken tension hanging in the air, the one we'd been ignoring, suddenly made itself very real. I lowered my voice. Darla, I trust you. You're literally the only woman I trust right now, but I need you to swear something. Don't let me break my vows tonight. I mean it. She met my eyes and gave a solemn nod. I won't. Then with a gentle smile, she kissed my cheek. We'll review the audio tomorrow. I brought my laptop. We can split the files, get through them quicker. Sounds like a plan, I muttered as I headed toward the bathroom, craving a long, hot shower. It wasn't just physical grime I needed to wash off. The emotional residue, betrayal, exhaustion, everything clung to me like oil. When the scalding water hit my skin, it cracked the emotional dam I'd built. Suddenly the flood came rushing in, heartbreak, confusion, rage. Then I heard the faint squeak of the shower door opening. Later she tucked me in, gently pulling a sheet over me before circling the bed and slipping in beside me. I felt absolutely nothing, just empty, eyes shut. Sleep came instantly, not from peace but pure exhaustion. I was hollowed out, mentally, physically, emotionally drained. When morning light filtered in, I woke with something unexpected on my face, a smile. Darla leaned in, pulling me into a firm hug. It took a second to register. She was straddling me. I knew then it was time to speak plainly. Darla, just hear me out for a second, I said, slightly breathless. She paused, then gave me a slow, understanding nod. I regret how that sounded, I began. Last night felt unreal, like some nightmare I couldn't wake from. And yeah, I've had moments where I thought of you in that way. But I love my wife, or at least, I loved the version of her before that monster got involved. But if I find out Sierra was complicit in this, I won't stay. I'll end it. I'll file for divorce. And if that happens, if you still want this, then I'll commit to you. Completely. That's a promise. Her breath hitched, her eyes shimmering. That's exactly why I fell for you, she whispered. You don't sugarcoat anything. You say what's real. Her voice carried both affection and quiet pain. Thanks, sweetheart, I said softly. I stepped out of the room to get dressed, but Darla wasn't behind me. The scent of something frying caught my attention and led me to the kitchen. Smiling, I pulled on a pair of jeans and a clean t-shirt, clipped on my belt, and slid my Colt into its holster. Normally I wouldn't carry it home, but given the current situation and a potentially unhinged shrink in the wind, I wasn't taking any chances. Darla was armed too, her compact 9mm Smith & Wesson visible at her side. She'd gotten licensed for concealed carry not long after coming on board. Smells incredible, I said as I stepped into the kitchen, my first real smile since everything unraveled. Glad you think so, she replied, flashing a grin before flipping whatever was in the skillet. The savory blend of bacon, cheese, and salsa told me all I needed. She was making omelets, and clearly not for the first time. She wore one of my old shirts, a size too big on her, paired with the same jeans from last night. Her blouse was still abandoned on the bedroom floor. "Darla, I know this is going to be hard, for both of us," I said, easing into the bar stool at the kitchen counter. She shot me a pointed look. "Nate, don't start treating me like I'm some porcelain doll. You told me right at the beginning this job could get messy, and with my history, you knew I could handle it. That hasn't changed. Yeah, I've got feelings for you, but I'm not stepping away from this case. It matters to me too. Sierra's my friend, and that sleazeball of a doctor, he's going to wish he never laid eyes on her." Every word she said rang with absolute conviction. Before I hired her, Darla had spent 2 years as an LAPD detective, until she got canned for putting a suspect through a wall. She dodged formal charges, mostly because the guy she roughed up was guilty as sin. The department didn't want the PR nightmare of going public, so they gave her a payout and quietly walked her to the door, hoping she'd stay silent about the real reason they let her go. She didn't sugarcoat anything in our first conversation, laid everything bare from the start. That blunt honesty, it's part of why I brought her on board. I wasn't looking for someone timid. I needed a person ready to wade straight into the chaos, no second guessing. Darla? She didn't flinch, not once. It was easy to forget that about her sometimes. And yeah, you're right, I did forget. I gave her a small nod. "There's something I've never told anyone, not even Sierra," I said quietly. I drew in a long breath, steadying myself. I trusted Darla to handle what I was about to say. She'd put faith in me, and I'd done my due diligence, checked out her past, understood why she was let go, verified it all. Her brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Darla, I was never in insurance," I confessed. "My actual job? It was with our organization, but in a completely different role." There it was. "The truth is, my real name's Nate Corbin. I used to be a covert operative." "Yeah, I get it. Sounds like a cliché straight out of Burn Notice." She didn't respond at first, just stared at me, then turned back toward the stove, calmly plated the omelets, and set them down next to our coffee. God, I adored that woman. "I kind of suspected," she said casually. "Either that or you've got some sealed criminal record." She smirked a little. "You're always watching your six, like you expect someone to pop up behind you. You hide it well, but I've seen it, for years. The way you handle surveillance gear, it's not normal. And don't get me started on your lockpicking. You're a freaking magician." I let out a laugh, sharp as ever. She saw more than most. "You're impressive," I said, lifting my coffee and taking a sip. "Damn, perfect as always. And you seriously make the best coffee on earth, just so you know." She laughed. "Thanks, boss. There's more to me than a hot face and a killer figure, you know." She winked playfully. "I know," I said. "If that was all you brought to the table, I wouldn't have hired you." I gave a slight shrug. She leaned over and kissed my cheek. "Thanks, Nate, for everything, no matter what comes next." She smiled, soft and sincere. "You're not about to walk out on me, are you?" I asked with a grin. "That's not happening. You're stuck with me until we're old and falling apart." She paused, then smiled wider. "You're right," she added. "Even if someone offered me $1 million a day, I couldn't leave you." "Good," I said, "because I sure as hell can't match that kind of paycheck. And you're the best assistant I've ever had." "Finally, some actual appreciation," she teased. "Now shut it and eat before I smack you." She stuck her tongue out. I returned the gesture. I dug in. And wow, the omelet? Absolutely killer. That woman could cook like nobody's business. There's that old saying about how to win a guy's heart. Girls get taught 2 classic paths. One's through his stomach. The other, well, you can guess. For me, it's both. Sierra, she was fire in bed. My own private hurricane. She held her own in the kitchen, too. But, yeah, here comes the but. Darla's cooking might just edge her out. If Darla could entertain even half as well as she handled breakfast, I'd be in trouble, serious trouble. Even knowing Sierra had been manipulated by that joke of a therapist, the bitterness still lingered. She'd gone to some crackpot shrink behind my back, never said a word. That wasn't like her. In the beginning, she told me everything. But ever since the therapy started, she'd closed me off, completely. After breakfast, I stepped in to help Darla with the dishes. When she finished rinsing the last one, she turned around, and before I could react, her arms were around my neck, pulling me in. "I'm sorry, Nate," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "I don't think either of us is." I let out a low laugh. "God, I wish I'd met you before my wife." "Me too," she replied, her voice tinged with quiet regret. Damn. No matter how this ended, someone was going to get hurt, and I prayed it wouldn't be either of them, especially if Sierra had truly been manipulated, or worse, brainwashed. We needed the truth. "Let's go watch those videos," I said. "I think this might give us a clearer picture of where Sierra's mind was at," I murmured. We stepped into my study, and I started transferring a portion of the video files onto her laptop. It made the most sense to begin where everything started, with Sierra. The first video didn't raise any immediate red flags, just a standard introduction, nothing unusual on the surface. He began with light, non-threatening questions before casually slipping in a warning, not to show anyone the recordings, claiming it could hinder her progress in therapy. The guy was calculating. From the beginning, it was obvious he had a plan. And because she followed his advice to keep me uninformed, I was completely unaware of what was happening, completely powerless to step in or shield her. He exploited the trust she placed in him as a mental health professional, violating boundaries meant to protect her. It was a textbook example of unethical behavior. The second session peeled back more layers. His inquiries became personal, especially about her relationship with me. Every word she said, he scribbled into that damned notebook. When the questions veered into intimate territory, she hesitated, but he comforted her, promised discretion. That assurance was all it took for her defenses to drop again. When the session wrapped, he echoed the same confidentiality rule. She nodded in agreement. I checked the timestamps, 16 sessions in total, each fitting neatly into his regular Monday-Wednesday slots. With a sigh of frustration, I buried my face in my hands. Watching the third video was gut-wrenching. There was no explicit pressure, no overt brainwashing, but his twisted interpretation of professional conduct was nothing but a disguise. Things shifted in the fourth session. That's when the seduction began. He coaxed her into sharing her fantasies, encouraging her to paint vivid, detailed pictures. She got through 2 scenarios before the clock ran out. Another reminder to keep quiet. Another silent nod. Tapes 5 and 6 followed the same dark rhythm. She opened up. He underlined secrecy. She obeyed. The rest of the recordings followed a steady descent, each probing deeper into her desires, many involving some form of betrayal or cheating. By the 14th session, he'd done more than listen. He'd planted and nurtured an idea. One that cast me and another man into her therapy plan. That's when something clicked for me. From that point on, he didn't even bother asking for secrecy. He already knew she wouldn't speak a word. Tape 15 was the most recent turning point. It had been recorded just under 2 weeks ago. He made a proposition. He could be the second man in her fantasy, if that's what she truly wanted. For nearly a quarter of an hour, she wrestled with the idea. He kept gently nudging her, guiding her toward a conclusion he'd already decided for her. Eventually, she relented. The final video didn't differ much, except this time she took the lead. She told him she'd call to set the date. I hit pause and glanced at Darla, who sat beside me, her eyes glassy with tears and burning with the same disgust I felt. "This guy's a smooth predator," I muttered. "All charm, all poison." Darla nodded, her voice tight with rage, and clearly proud of it. "Did you catch his password? Total narcissist move. I'm going to destroy this bastard in court so thoroughly he'll wish he never had a license to begin with," I said, quietly but with absolute resolve. Our eyes locked. "You've got my full support," she said, settling on the edge of my desk. "Looks like the longer sessions are where he really pushed the limits. The other women didn't engage this long, not like Sierra." She gave a small, confirming nod. "Makes sense. Their case files hinted at that. You've just given me proof." "This guy's manipulation skills would make Machiavelli blush," I said, shaking my head. "But technically, he didn't force them. No threats, no hypnosis. He just rewired their judgment, made them think it was okay, harmless even. Exactly, she agreed. But Sierra's the only one whose husband ended up tangled in the mess directly. Same pattern with the others, though. The husbands eventually found out. Then came the separations. She listed off the names of the women and their now former spouses. Good. Reach out to a few of those ex-husbands. I want to know how they uncovered what this scumbag was doing behind closed doors. Then I added, and I need to speak to Jessa. After walking Darla out, I picked up my phone and dialed Jessa's number. Hello? She answered. It's Nate, I said, my voice tight. Oh, Nate, I'm glad you called. Are you starting the investigation today? She asked, clearly hopeful. Actually, it's already done, and it's worse than you imagined. A long silence stretched between us before I continued. Can you come by? Either today or tomorrow. There's a lot to go over. Some of it's professional, some of it personal. I want to be clear, I'm not asking you over for anything inappropriate. This just means a lot to me. Would you like to talk more about it, Nate? She asked softly. She made only one stipulation, no phone conversations. Ideally tonight or first thing in the morning, I suggested. My assistant Darla will join us. She has crucial intel you need to hear. What's the address? She asked. I shared it, and she told me she'd arrive in 10 minutes. 11 minutes later, precisely, a car eased into the driveway. I glanced through the window. She had arrived, in a sleek, immaculate Jaguar XJ6. I opened the door to welcome her inside. Darla brought in fresh coffee while I grabbed our laptops from the study. We set them on the coffee table and sat on either side of Jessa. I wasted no time. Jessa, Dorian is a seasoned deceiver, a calculated predator. He leverages his professional image to seduce married women and devastate their lives from the inside out. Darla chimed in. Every video we've uncovered features married women. Not a single one involves someone single. That seems to be his deliberate choice. There's a clear method to what he does, I continued. He gains their confidence, talks through their marriage troubles or fantasies, and weaponizes that trust. It's not force or blackmail, but what you'll see is deeply disturbing. I started going through the video files one at a time. Jessa's expression turned to shock as she realized how extensive the evidence was. How the hell did he keep this hidden? She shouted, her face reddening with rage. Jessa, please, try to stay composed, I said, my voice tightening. There's something else. She looked at me like I'd just started speaking in code. There's more? Yes, this isn't just a case, it's personal. I opened a particular file and highlighted a name on the screen. Sierra Corbin. My wife was his latest target. Oh my God, Nate, I can't believe it. I'm so sorry. She reached over and wrapped her arms around me in a tight embrace. He won't get away with this. I swear, I'll burn his entire life down if I have to. Jessa, do you know what Dorian is worth? I asked. I'm planning to sue for alienation of affection and gross misconduct as a licensed professional. Don't worry, I'll get you in touch with the sharpest divorce lawyer in California, Wes. He'll make sure Dorian pays in full. She let out a bitter laugh. Nate, Dorian is worth over $250 million. Between international properties, a thriving practice, and his bestsellers, not to mention his appearances on Dr. Phil. But those books? That's where the real money came in. Perfect, I said. Then we strike. Fast, hard, and loud. A legal blitz. Give us a few days to assemble everything. Are you in? I glanced at Darla, then back at Jessa. She nodded with certainty. I trust you both. And Nate, I'm truly sorry for what he did to you. I should have seen through him a long time ago. It's all right, I told her. Come by the office tomorrow. I'll introduce you to Wes. He's managing both my divorce from Sierra and the civil suits we're building against Dorian. By Friday, we'll be bringing in other former spouses. We're coordinating multiple lawsuits, malpractice, emotional exploitation, everything. I outlined the strategy step by step. When I finished, she was nodding slowly. Then a small but fierce smile spread across her face. I'm in. The hardest part will be acting like nothing's wrong for the next couple days. Tell him you need some space, or better yet, say you're going to visit your mother. That should throw him off the trail. She agreed. He's trained to read emotional shifts, so I'll call my mom, tell her everything, and ask her to help sell the story. Smart move, I said. You're welcome to stay here. The guest room has a queen bed and the garage can fit 2 more cars. I handed her the garage opener, which she took with a look of gratitude. Jessa headed home to pack. Darla did the same. About 30 minutes later, Jessa returned, hauling enough clothes for an entire week. I couldn't help but chuckle as she carried the bags into my room, stacking them neatly inside the dresser that once belonged to Sierra. Relentless, I had to admire that. The next morning, just as I was getting out of bed, Darla still asleep beside me, Jessa was back, focused and ready for whatever came next. Darla was still in the shower when the familiar rumble of the garage door echoed through the house. As always, Jessa looked breathtaking. She stepped inside and greeted me with a warm embrace, one that carried understanding and unspoken purpose. In one hand, she carried a small suitcase, enough for a few nights. In the other, a folder packed with financial documents from Darla's son's account. I couldn't help but give a low whistle when I saw just how loaded the kid was. Over breakfast, yet another masterpiece Darla whipped up for the 3 of us, Jessa leaned in and said softly but clearly that she was ready to proceed. I told her we could set things in motion right after we informed every ex involved. There were 11 ex-husbands to reach out to, each one responsible for notifying his former spouse about what was unfolding. Our plan? File individual suits against Dr. Dump truck for malpractice and alienation of affection. Each one of them was on board, and more than willing to get their pound of flesh. Most of the men were practically frothing at the chance to go after Zasrans. And surprisingly, many of their ex-wives were equally fired up, eager to be part of the fallout. But there was one name I intentionally left off the list, Sierra. Especially after watching that final video. I showed up at Wes's office with 9 of the 11 former husbands we'd managed to reach, along with their ex-wives. I took a seat too, being the 12th. To make things efficient, Wes prepared boilerplate legal complaints, one for malpractice, one for alienation, just swapping out the names depending on which former couple was up next. He looked like a kid on Christmas morning. We were talking over $175 million in liquid assets and another $100 million in properties spread across the globe, most of which Dr. Dumbass would likely be forced to sell off once the lawsuits hit. Sure, we could have gone for a class action, but this wasn't just about the win. This was about watching everything he built go up in flames. I wanted Dr. Dorian Threat Langston to witness the ruin from the front row as his empire crumbled piece by piece. Jessa, Darla, and I hung back while Wes churned through client after client, each more eager than the last to burn Langston to the ground and make some cash doing it. Wes might be my friend, but he's still a lawyer at heart. After he'd printed out and signed all the legal docs, set to be delivered at Langston's office Monday morning with plenty of witnesses, it was finally our turn. I filed for divorce from Sierra. Jessa submitted her own paperwork, aiming right at her soon-to-be bankrupt husband. Wes took one glance at Jessa, and it was obvious he was taken with her. Judging by her smile, the interest was mutual. We agreed that each defendant's papers would be served simultaneously by separate process servers to maximize the chaos. Wes, Jessa, Darla, and I stood there all grins, like ghouls at a Halloween bash. Monday was going to be an absolute spectacle, and we had front-row seats. As a bonus, Wes drew up restraining orders for each of us against Dr. Dumbass on the house. He could practically see the dollar signs stacking up as this legal bomb prepared to detonate. Next came Phase 2. Phase 2 was our scorched earth plan, press and law enforcement. I edited hours of video footage using some new software I'd picked up, scrubbing out faces, disguising voices, scrubbing any trace of our names. I cut together segments that exposed how Dr. Langston made it his personal mission to dismantle marriages for his own twisted ego. There were also clips from sessions with other women, each one subtly pushed into betraying her spouse under Langston's careful manipulation. This was the kind of thing that would explode across every media outlet. And with it, the FBI would likely be forced to act. The California Board of Psychology wouldn't have a choice either. They'd have to come down hard. To protect myself, I created a dummy email address, bounced it through multiple proxies. No trace left behind. Phase 2 kicked off first thing Monday, right after all the process servers had done their part. The last of them had just walked out when I handed Jessa a bucket of popcorn. She snacked on it with a smile, just as Darla Boy came tearing out of the office, panic written all over his face. He spotted us, me, Jessa, Darla, standing calm and collected. I pulled out my phone, tapped send on the mass email, and let the storm off the leash. We climbed into my car and drove off. Behind us, Dr. Dyke shrieked nonsense, red-faced and vowing revenge. The final image burned into my mind was him collapsing in the parking lot, fists full of papers, sobbing like a broken man. And that was just the start. Step 3 began when we sat down with Sierra. She'd been staying with her in-laws, though she'd soon find out that wouldn't last much longer, unless she got very, very lucky. We met somewhere public, Starbucks, one of my favorite places. She arrived first. "I'm here," she said, a flicker of hope in her voice. "Does this mean we can talk?" "Not really," I said, giving her a measured smile. "If you'd been coerced, manipulated by that bastard, I might have found it in me to forgive you. Truly." I paused. "But after 16 hours of footage where you nodded along to everything he said, your so-called disagreements were just performance, you actually told me I should embrace being cucked just so you could live out your domination fantasies." I looked at her slow and steady. "Sierra, I would have done anything for you. You don't even understand how deep that love went. Past tense. I would have died for you. But after what I saw, after that final betrayal, I can't unsee it. I can't forgive it." She didn't say a word. I pulled the divorce papers from my jacket and extended them to her. "You've already been served," I said. "I think you'll agree this is more than fair." She stared down at the papers, visibly shaken. "You can't be serious. I wasn't thinking straight, sweetheart." Her voice cracked with desperation. "Please, you've got to believe me." She was spiraling, and that's when I decided it was time for the final blow. "If I were in your shoes, Sierra, I'd start rehearsing what to tell your parents." Something told me they'd already received a little anonymous gift, one that painted a clear picture of the kind of daughter they'd raised. Without another word, I stood up and walked out, leaving her paralyzed by shock. Wes asked Jessa out. To my surprise, she agreed. I assured her he was the real deal, or as close to it as he could be. When she raised an eyebrow, I replied, "He's a divorce lawyer." I shrugged like it was no big deal. "Well then," she said with a mischievous grin, "I guess I'll just have to keep a close watch on him." "Seriously, though," I added, trying to reassure her, "he's one of the good ones. I wouldn't be working with him if he weren't." The following day, Wes called. Sierra and her lawyer wanted a meeting. I agreed and brought Darla along, not for strategy but for emotional backup. "I'm here," I said calmly, taking a seat across from Sierra and her attorney, a younger, sharper version of Gloria Allred. Wes and Darla flanked me. "I'm Jean Albrook," she said, her tone clipped. "I'll be representing your wife. Based on everything I've heard, she's been through substantial emotional harm. That's why I've taken the case pro bono." She dove in without hesitation. "Let's begin with the fact that your proposed settlement terms are completely unacceptable." When she finished, I leaned forward. "Ms. Albrook, let me be clear. I have more than enough evidence to convince any court that my soon-to-be ex-wife was complicit in a calculated scheme to humiliate me. It was her plan from the beginning." I took a measured breath. "And just so we're on the same page, I'm not, nor will I ever be, part of the lifestyle she tried to assign to me. Given the circumstances, what I'm offering is generous." I leaned back, composed. "And where is this supposed evidence?" she asked, her tone cool and dismissive. Wes, bless him, slid a DVD across the table. Inside was everything. It included the final 2 therapy sessions Sierra had with Dr. Langston, along with audio from a hidden recorder I carried and a video I shot with my phone. The footage captured them laying out the entire setup. She was to play the confused, delicate wife, exploring her identity, while Dr. Langston guided the narrative. Then came the audio, my voice, discovering the truth as it happened. Next, the video. grainy but unmistakable footage of the two of them, laughing in our bed, followed by the scene where I grabbed her phone and hurled it to the floor. "If that's not enough," Wes added smugly, "I've got backups. Let me know. Happy to make more copies." Albrook looked like she wished she could vanish into thin air. She reached for the agreement Wes had drafted on my behalf. Considering the emotional torture she'd dragged me through, it was lenient. She'd receive $75,000 in a vehicle. She could gather her belongings, but only under my terms. I'd also pay for her to live in an apartment for a year. We didn't have children, so child support was off the table, and alimony absolutely not. That point wasn't up for debate. Still, the apartment was nice enough. After a brief, whispered exchange between Sierra and her lawyer, the younger Allred looked back at me. "We accept the terms, Mr. Corbin." "Wise decision," I said, smiling faintly. We signed. John handled the notarization. The hearing was set for 30 days later. Those 30 days were the longest of my life, agonizingly slow. Every night, Darla and I kissed like teenagers in love, but I still couldn't bring myself to take the final step with her. Not because I didn't want to. I wanted nothing more, but something in me held back. Call it stubbornness, call it pride. Honestly, by the end, even I thought I was just being an idiot. Finally, the court date arrived. It had been a long time since we'd had a case this significant, the last being the Langston mess, so the build-up had us both on edge. But when the judge banged the gavel and made it official, I turned to Darla, wrapped her in my arms, and kissed her until the world fell away. As we separated, Sierra approached us. "I'm sorry, Nate," she said softly. "For what it's worth, I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she looked at Darla. "Please take care of him, and don't make the same mistake I did." Darla stepped closer, her voice calm and strong. "Sierra, I've loved Nate since the moment I first saw him. I stayed away because he loved you, and because you were my friend too." Her tone didn't waver. "You both were, but after what you did, I couldn't just stand by anymore." "I'm not sorry," she added, slipping her hand into mine. "I love this man, and I will spend the rest of our lives showing him that." The words left me breathless, but what stunned me most came next. Sierra stepped forward and hugged Darla tightly. Darla moved into my apartment during the required 30-day cooling-off period. We kept ourselves more than busy. Whether that helped me get past my poor judgment or just kept me distracted until the divorce was finalized, I couldn't say. The moment we got back from court, I slipped off my ring and tossed it onto the coffee table like it was burning my skin. Then I scooped Darla up and carried her straight to the bedroom, no hesitation. It took close to 3 years before the storm I'd kicked up against Dr. Dorian Langston finally died down. The ripple effects touched more people than I could have imagined. But the settlements we squeezed out of that creep helped mend more than a few broken homes. Some of the couples he'd torn apart actually ended up getting back together, even walking down the aisle again. Good for them. Truly, I mean that. Once the chaos from all the malpractice and injury suits against Dr. Diftard started to fade, I heard some updates about Sierra. She's apparently living large out in Vegas these days, working as a dominatrix of all things. Oddly enough, based on what Langston uncovered from her twisted psyche, it kind of tracks. Her parents? They cut her off completely. Can't say I blame them, especially after I sent them the footage of her and her boyfriend scheming against me. Actions have consequences. She made her choices. After Jessa walked out on Dorian and took well over half of everything with her, the legal hammer came crashing down hard. He confessed, lost his medical license, and by the end of it all was financially ruined. But that didn't mean the people he'd hurt were left hanging. Justice just took its time. Sometime before the criminal proceedings kicked off, an unnamed party paid Dr. Douchebag a personal visit. He ended up in the hospital for weeks after that little encounter. Shattered kneecaps, arms in casts, and let's just say, permanent damage below the belt. How do I know all that? Let's just say, some answers are best left unspoken. Now, if you don't mind, there's an old aluminum bat in the closet that could use a fresh shine. As for Wes and Jessa, they dated for about 6 months before getting married. They were practically glued together, with Jessa best man and Darla standing proudly by their sides on the big day. Wes came out of the lawsuits with enough cash to call it a career, and the two of them are fully committed to enjoying their golden years together. The trial was practically a formality. Dr. Fool's lawyer didn't even manage to get the footage of Acciolio seducing half those women admitted into evidence. Verdict? Guilty, across the board. When Dorian finally landed in prison, he didn't even make it 2 days. The guards found him hanging in his cell. Looked like he chose a quick exit over facing the train wreck his life had become. I didn't shed a single tear. That's one less parasite walking the earth. In the end, the man who tore so many lives to pieces finally cracked himself. Can't say I mourned. And as it turned out, he never bothered updating his will. So Jessa, now his legal beneficiary, used a good portion of the inheritance to help the victims he'd left in his wake. Gotta respect her for that. As for Darla and me, the lawsuits paid off, big time. $15 million, if you can believe it. Yes, I absolutely did the pinky-to-mouth gesture when I said that. We've since hung up our hats and started a quiet life raising 2 incredible kids. Our son Nicholas, Darla was set on using his full name, and I was more than happy to go along with it, is nearly ready for preschool. Our daughter Ivy is pure joy. These days things are calm. That final case? Weil doesn't even begin to cover it. But in the end, things turned out better than I ever imagined.